Please take seats. We start in 1 or 2 minutes. And everyone who follows us through streaming. I'm very glad to see you here and very glad that you have been able to join us today. Today's event is organized by the European Liberal Forum, co-founded by the European Parliament and supported by the Academy of Liberalism. Due to the spread of coronavirus, we kindly ask to wear the masks at all times. So, before we continue with the keynote speech, I'd like to introduce European Liberal Forum board member Milos Howden, who is going to have a few words for the opening. Milos, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very much impressed and jealous that you can actually still meet in a physical event, because here in Warsaw, where I'm sitting right now, it's not possible anymore. But thank you so much for organizing this event. Thank you so much on behalf of the Board of Directors of the European Liberal Forum and of European Liberal Forum itself. For those of you who do not know ELF, ELF is a think tank and a foundation of the ALDE party, working very close with the Renew group in the European Parliament. So this is a liberal think tank and a liberal foundation. And I would like to say thank you so much, Academy of Liberalism. Thank you so much, my Estonian colleagues, for hosting this event, which is very timely, I would say. And especially now when most of us, or many of us, refresh our websites with Pennsylvania election results, looking for who the next president of the US will be, because this will also very much influence the topic of climate change and the climate change policies all over the world, because this has been one of the topics in the US campaign, and it's hard to start such an event on climate change without mentioning that. As you probably all know, only a few days ago, the United States left the Paris Agreement, but the person who's supposed to be the next president of the US, it looks like that Joe Biden said that it will be the first thing he will do in office. He will rejoin the Paris Agreement. So this is a good news, of course, for all of us, for all people who work in the topic of climate change and are looking for solutions. But this is the positive note. But the negative note is that most probably the Green Deal of Joe Biden, the $1.7 trillion worth package on sustainable development, on green jobs, will not come true, because the progressive wave, the green wave in the Congress has not actually happened as expected. Also, there will not be most probably the majority in the Senate. And what does it mean for us in Europe? Mostly, it means that the European Union, Europe, will have to take, once again, a very clear lead in these topics. We'll have to lead the world in sustainable development, in the so-called green agenda. And there is a huge role for the liberals, for us, for liberal parties, for liberal think tanks, for liberal organizations, because our approach to the topic it's a bit different than approach of the others. Because for us, for liberals, the very important aspect of the climate change is that we see Of course, we don't underestimate the threats, we don't underestimate the challenges, but what we see also is the optimistic solutions. We as liberals, we believe that there is still something we can do, that we must act really quickly, but also that there is a big hope for us, big hope to face these challenges and big hope to develop. So yeah, one more time, I would like to say thank you so much for organizing this very timely event, and I'm pretty sure that we will all have a very fruitful discussions within next hours. Thank you so much on behalf of the European Liberal Forum.
Thank you, Milos. Now let's move on with the keynote speech. I'm glad to give the stage to Kadri Simson, European Commissioner for Energy. Please, Kadri, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone here in the room and also online, and I hope that I'm keeping enough physical distance so that I can take off my mask. Well, it feels very good to be back home and to see so many familiar faces. And we all know that the current pandemic has influenced our daily lives, and for me, it has meant countless hours in front of TV screen. So therefore, it is good to have a physical meeting, but of course we have to keep in mind that that might be a very last physical meeting in this season. So thank you for this opportunity and for the chance to speak about the European Green Deal, green recovery, and of course the future of Europe's energy system. With the European Green Deal, we have set our sight on a climate-neutral Europe by 2050. This means that in the coming 30 years, we must fundamentally transform our energy systems, making it cleaner and more efficient. And we truly live in extraordinary times. The COVID pandemic offers Europe and the world an opportunity for change. To be honest, we don't have much of a choice. We are in a pivotal moment, at a point in time when two major crises meet. The economic crisis caused by the pandemic and climate issues we have seen and we have been facing and addressing for a while. As you know, since taking office last December, the Commission has made fighting climate change its top priority. This means reaching climate neutrality by 2050. It also means cutting emissions faster by raising our emission reduction target to minus 55% also by 2030. And this is necessary if we want to have a balanced, realistic pathway to reach net zero by 2050. Today, as we face the economic impact of COVID, we want to ensure that our recovery is a green one that helps us to build back better our economies, create sustainable growth and jobs for all Europeans. There are two main reasons we need this. First, addressing the economic crisis and the climate crisis are two sides of the same coin. The actions to decarbonize our economies can at the same time help improve the competitiveness of our industry and create new opportunities for lasting growth. Second, by investing in future-oriented sectors such as clean energy, also energy efficiency or circular economy, we are building a more sustainable, resilient economy, better equipped for future shocks. So while on one hand, the virus has posed a challenge to tackle climate change, it has ultimately only strengthened our conviction that our strategic choices at its core have been the right ones. Let me give you an overview of how the EU plans to fight these complex problems. Our answer to this twin challenge is an unprecedented financial package that includes the long-term EU budget and Next Generation EU, our recovery fund. Together, they amount to 1.8 trillion euros, and the green transition has a key role in both. The 1.1 trillion EU budget for the next 7 years and the 750 billion recovery package should channel 30% of the funds to climate-related investments. For the Recovery and Resilience Fund and Recovery and Resilience Facility, the biggest recovery instrument, this would mean 37% of the money is going to green transition. And that is about 250 billion euros, making the Recovery and Resilience Facility the single most important EU instrument for green energy transition in the coming years. In order to benefit from the facility, member states should submit their recovery and resilience plans, outlining their specific reform and investment proposals. The plans should address challenges set out in the country-specific recommendations of the European semester and be consistent, in particular with the national energy and climate plans and just transition plans. Each member state knows their needs the best, and therefore Brussels is not going to dictate which reforms and investments would be most beneficial for each member state. But the recovery plans need to be in line with our common priorities, the green and digital transition in particular. I truly believe that we will only succeed in delivering the European Green Deal if it is fair and if it is seen fair by the people. We are very much aware that EU countries have different starting positions for the transition to climate neutrality. Every commissioner knows it, thanks to their background. And Estonia and our oil shale production is a good example. We have a big region, largely dependent on this industry, which needs our help if we plan to move away from fossil fuels towards green solutions. This is why ensuring a just transition is at the heart of our strategy for both the Green Deal and the recovery. In addition to the already mentioned Recovery and Resilience Facility, the Commission has proposed a new and dedicated instrument to support the regions and people most affected by this transition. As you might know, the three-pillar Just Transition mechanism will support investments in these regions. It includes grants, loans and guarantees, and is foreseen to mobilize tens of billions of euros of public and private funds in the next decade. Our most relevant instrument here is the new Just Transition Fund, a total of 17.5 billion euros in grants, supporting the regions and people most influenced. And we know that in every member state there are regions that are affected more than others by the green transition. It can fund projects for renovating buildings, installing solar PVs on the roofs, or helping to reskill the workers from example, peat mining, to renovating these mentioned buildings and installing these PVs. The second pillar of the mechanism, the so-called Just Transition Scheme, will provide guarantees for loans in many areas: renewables, energy efficiency, building renovation, green technologies and sustainable energy infrastructure. And it will operate within the InvestEU. And the third pillar, public sector loan facility, will combine grants and loans to support energy infrastructure, district heating networks, public transport and energy efficiency, including renovation of buildings. The JTM funding will need to be dedicated and support activities most relevant for any given region. And to this end, the member states will need to finalize the territorial just transition plans, which set out their visions for the regions and define relevant actions. As I mentioned before, the EU is speeding up the transition to climate neutrality. The Commission has proposed in our climate target plan for 2030 to increase our greenhouse gas reduction target for that year from at least 40%, that was our current target, to at least minus 55%. And the current climate and energy legislation has to be updated with our new objectives in mind once they are approved by the Council and by the European Parliament. Achieving an increased greenhouse gas emission reduction target of at least 55% is doable, but it will require actions in all sectors. There is no single silver bullet solution, with energy accounting more than or almost 75% of greenhouse gas emissions right now in EU. The contribution of the energy sector to this increased target will be crucial, and accelerated clean energy transition has a key role, but all other sectors must contribute too. We believe that moving first and taking bigger steps will also put our union in a better competitive position and contribute to job and growth creation, as well as recovery from the current crisis. So the question is, how do we plan to reach our goals? We already have a part of the puzzle. We know that to become climate neutral by 2050, we need to transform our entire energy system. In broad terms, we need to be more energy efficient, use more renewable energy, have better infrastructure, and support constant research and innovation. Today's energy system is mostly built along parallel value chains that rigidly connect a specific energy sources to the end user. It is inefficient and makes deep decarbonization very difficult. What we need are more flexible and better integrated systems that can accommodate a much higher share of renewables and other clean solutions. I strongly believe that investing in future-oriented technologies and innovation is crucial for our recovery and resilience. It's an area where we could always do more, both to boost our economy and to move towards a climate neutrality target. To encourage the development of the renewable industry in the current political and social environment, governments need to provide a clear sense of direction and of predictability. And this is what the European Union is doing with its climate law and the increased climate ambition for 2030. These are clear signals for the industry, showing that EU member states are on the same page and that everyone needs to be prepared for a climate neutral economy. It is also crucial to guarantee that the support to the clean energy sector will be sustained. And this is, for example, why it's legally forbidden for the EU member states to retroactively change their renewable support schemes in a way that would be detrimental. In addition to this general approach, we are working closely with specific sectors to ensure that we respond to their exact needs. For example, in the wind energy sector, and especially offshore wind, EU is the world leader. As global competition is growing, we need a strategic approach to maintain this EU industrial and technological advantage. This is why the Commission will soon present a dedicated strategy for the offshore renewables energies to identify where support is needed the most, to provide certainty to investors and developers, foster research, innovation and competitiveness, reduce supply dependency, and build an offshore energy value chain benefiting a broad range of regions and economies. By looking at the development of offshore energy from a European perspective, we will also support cross-border cooperation and address collectively the challenges posed by integrating the additional amount of clean energy in our energy systems. Electrification is a key avenue for energy system integration and a cost-effective decarbonization, as set out in our recent strategy. Renewables have a huge potential to expand beyond today's levels. In power, their deployment will also trigger production of renewable hydrogen needed to bring down emissions in transport as well as in heating and cooling. Infrastructure will need to be adopted and expanded in line with these developments. According to our assessment, achieving at least 55% greenhouse gas emissions target would mean a share of renewables in final energy consumption of about 38% to 40% in 2030. And this is significantly more than today's levels and today's target, which is 32%. So, dear audience here and online, the Industrial Revolution started with a simple idea: to convert coal into steam and to use it this steam to drive industrial processes, trucks and trains. Today we still rely for around 86% on converting coal, oil and gas to run our industries, drive our cars and heat our homes. New ideas are needed to raise the challenge of transitioning to a climate-neutral economy. We are already at a rapid pace replacing coal, but also oil and natural gas with renewable forms of energy. But this is not enough. We need an entire rethinking of all the ways we produce, transport, convert and use energy, and of the roles of all actors along the way. Hydrogen, for example, has significant potential to decarbonize sectors like heavy industry and transport. It is already in use. We simply need to ramp up the production of renewable hydrogen that does not create emissions during its life cycle. I have already had the chance to speak on hydrogen in Estonia many times, and it is great to see that you have local players realizing its immense potential. Hydrogen is a universal opportunity. Every member state can benefit from it. Every member state can benefit from developing hydrogen in its economy. The Baltic Sea region has great assets, rich potential for renewable energies, including offshore wind, increasingly integrated energy markets, and industries that could benefit from renewable hydrogen. Building a competitive hydrogen industry can give us a much-needed boost, and it is estimated that every billion of investment that we will be able to attract in renewable hydrogen will create 10,000 jobs along the supply chain. There is also a less obvious solutions, some that one perhaps wouldn't immediately associate with climate neutrality. For instance, our Renovation Wave initiative that we presented in October. Europe's buildings are unique and reflect the culture and history of our continent, but they are also old, and very often they are inefficient. Buildings are responsible for about 40% of the total energy consumption and for 36% of the energy-related carbon emissions in the EU. And we need better performing buildings to make our continent carbon neutral by 2050. It is important also because we have to acknowledge that existing buildings will mostly be still around also in 2050. And the Renovation Wave contains our action plan with concrete regulatory, financing and enabling measures for the years to come. With the aim to mobilize forces at all levels in order to at least double the annual energy renovation rate of residential and non-residential buildings by 2030, which could result in as much as 35 million buildings units renovated by 2030. The challenge is to boost public and private investments, to overcome barriers, to ensure the renovation projects materialize, and to reach out to those most in need and provide them with social and affordable housing. Renovation Wave is also an opportunity to create much-needed jobs, potentially around 160,000 additional green jobs in the construction sector in the EU by 2030. It is also an opportunity for the 34 million Europeans who still, to this day, experience energy poverty and are unable to afford keeping their homes adequately warm. It will help us to put public buildings in the spotlight as role models and reference points for the uptake of renovation. And finally, Renovation Wave is also a chance to ensure a deep, inclusive and future-oriented transformation of the built environment and create a European Bauhaus project that brings together civil society, citizens, architects, urban developers, designers, environmental and public health experts, investors and planning authorities in search for the best ideas for high-quality deep renovation. Of course, we also look into other areas. Although more challenging, much can be done to reduce emissions from energy use in transport and industry by 2030 and beyond. We need to ensure that advanced solutions, notably uptake of renewable hydrogen and other renewables and low-carbon fuels, are established to scale during this decade to deliver reductions needed to achieve carbon neutrality. Implementation of the hydrogen strategy, published in July in this year, is therefore a priority. Our projections for energy demand for transport show that the reduction in emissions is limited by 2030, but then goes through a dramatic evolution over 2030 to 2050 to reach a reduction of 54 to 61% compared to 2005. This is driven by the substitution of conventional internal combustion engine vehicles by zero and low emission vehicles, triggered in particular by the further tightening of CO2 emission standards. To be brutally honest, our energy mix in 10 years' time will still be dominated by fossil fuels, but significantly less than today. We are taking the right steps to reach our destination, and we already saw this when we talked about only achieving our current targets. The share of natural gas in 2030 will be 13% lower than in 2015, and that of coal will be significantly lower, up to minus 58%. I have here one spider. Luckily, I'm not afraid of those. If we manage to take action in line with our renewed ambition, we can see that by 2030, oil consumption has to go down by almost a third, and coal by almost 3/4. So by 2050, the situation changes fundamentally, and oil and natural gas consumptions are reduced to a fraction of current levels in our policy scenarios, and this is what we are aiming and working for. As is clear by now, achieving to 2030 and 2050 decarbonization objectives requires a major transformation of the energy systems, with a massive deployment of clean technologies and increased investments in the required solutions and infrastructures. It is also needed that we will change our way of thinking. For some of the decision to go green is obvious. Others still wonder why we have turned our focus on green and digital transition, and this means we need to work with those people to get them to buy into what we are trying to do. Yes, Europeans are keen and willing to discuss climate issues, and we are waiting for fundamental, comprehensive change from the leaders of the EU. But at the same time, they themselves need to be ready to change their behavior. Everyone can be a major player in tackling climate change, and we need every kind of activity from kids, mothers, fathers, and grandparents. And the European Green Deal is not only EU's climate and environmental strategy. It is also our growth strategy, and we know that the clean energy technologies sector outperforms conventional energy sources and creates more added value. So however, public and private investment in clean energy research and innovation is decreasing, putting at risk the development of the key technologies which we need to decarbonize the economy and reach the ambitious objectives of the European Green Deal. So once again, let me thank the organizers for the kind invitation to be here, and I very much look forward to upcoming panel and to hear your thoughts on the Green Deal and our future energy systems. Thank you for listening, and well, let's remember that we are all part of the change. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one question that came from Kalev Kallemets, and it goes like this. Indeed, carbon neutrality requires the use of all low neutral solutions. So, how and why is it logical and fair to the member states to exclude the nuclear energy that is extremely important to the half of EU member states?
Well, according to our long-term energy plan, we predict that by 2050, 85% of our energy consumption comes from renewables. But because of the treaty, each and every member state has the sovereignty to decide what their energy mix will look like. And some of our member states have decided that they will use nuclear. If they decide so, they can do so. But at the European Commission level, we are right now dealing with a question that we shouldn't invest into any kind of solution that does harm. And the researchers are right now figuring out what means do no significant harm in the perspective of nuclear, and especially nuclear waste questions.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Maybe one more? Okay. If not, then we will continue with the panel discussion on climate change. The panel lasts about an hour and a half, and the last 15 to 20 minutes we will have time for questions also. So our panelists today are Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simson. You can already sit, take your place. Member of Estonian Parliament, Andres Sutt. Member of European Parliament, Frederick Federley, who will appear on the screen on my left. And Rene Tammist from major Estonian utilities and energy company Utilitas. Kaja Kallas unfortunately couldn't join us because of the family reasons today. My name is Jonathan Kars and I'm from Meta Advisory. So, do we have Mr. Federley also? Okay, I hope he joins soon. So I think we can begin and he will join later. So I'd like to begin with a general question. Please explain, in your opinion, what are the biggest effects on Europe if we fail to put a stop on global warming? So maybe Rene, you be the first one.
First of all, I would like to thank for this opportunity to be part of this distinguished panel and for the organizers for organizing event on such an important topic. U.S. ex-president Barack Obama has said that climate change is the biggest threat that the humanity is facing, biggest threat to our planet. And I couldn't agree more. Indeed, the effects of climate change on Europe are clear and visible. We see them now, and they are intensifying even further. Droughts, desertification in southern and central part of Europe, floods, storms, unpredicted weather events more in the northern part of Europe, spread of disease, loss of biodiversity, and so on and so forth. But these effects are not only limited to Europe. Climate change is a global phenomenon, and as such, we have to address it also globally. So global cooperation in this regard is extremely important. And we cannot forget that simultaneously we have to address similar goals in the field of sustainability, so-called sustainable development goals. Goals such as eradicating poverty, ending world hunger, also spreading the good quality education and halting the loss of biodiversity and so forth. Just to bring an example, one of the most effective means to tackle climate change is not by some application of technologies, but the spread of education in Africa, girls' education in Africa, and increasing the living standards, and by that limiting the growth of population in sub-Saharan Africa. But just to exemplify the challenge we are facing is that in the remit of climate change. UN emissions gap report just recently put forward this challenge, and by 2040 we need to cut our carbon emissions to zero. Each year we have to cut emissions by 7.6%. It's roughly the amount that we are cutting the carbon emissions this year due to the COVID crisis. So the challenge is really immense.
Thank you. Any comments on that or additions?
Yeah, I think the question is really what kind of planet Earth we are handing over to our children and grandchildren. And that is very much in our own hands in terms of recognizing the challenge, seeing it rather as an opportunity and not only a threat. And then I think, as always, with these kind of big changes, it has a huge push for innovation. And this is where I, in particular, see the greatest opportunities in lifting the living standards. Everything what René said, I fully agree. Also, if we look at the demographics, the vast amount of population growth is going to stem from Africa over next 30, 40 years. And of course, as people move to the cities, we need to have an ecosystem what can really sustain the demographics, can sustain biodiversity, and so that we can hand over a planet that to the next generations, which is cleaner, better, and humanly and environmentally friendly.
Well, as René and Andres both mentioned, global warming is not a European challenge. It is a global challenge because Europe is responsible only for 9% of global greenhouse gas emissions. But of course, we can lead the way, and we need to find followers, like-minded governments. And we are working in this direction because there are lots of energy dialogues. And for example, first college-to-college meeting between European Commission took place with African Union Commission. Because there are, well, millions of people who don't have any access to electricity so right now, but they have vast opportunities to create renewables. When we presented our Green Deal, then it wasn't only about global warming, it was also our growth strategy. And now, in the context of COVID crisis, we need growth more than we needed it a year ago. We know that we will heavily invest into our industry to create jobs, and this is only wise to invest in innovative solutions. And of course, well, there are lots of other regions who do see the logic behind that. Only this autumn we witnessed that, for example, Japan and China announced their climate neutrality target years. So this is a very good example how other governments see the necessity to invest into new solutions. And from European perspective, we are the biggest region who is exporting, not exporting, but importing fossil fuels, natural gas and oil. And if we can replace part of it with renewables so that we are producing ourselves, that also significantly changes our ballot paper. And we will create jobs for our own industry. Thank you.
I have one follow-up question. You already mentioned some aspects of it, I think already, but what do you think has been the biggest obstacle of reducing CO2 emissions in Europe so far?
Well, we have reduced CO2 emissions, especially at the energy production sector. Mainly, we have achieved fast benefits because several member states have phased out coal, but they have replaced mainly it with natural gas. Well, for example, right now this kind of process is on the ongoing in Greece, where they are phasing out lignite in energy power generation. And they will reduce, by doing that, the greenhouse gas emissions by 60%. But if we want to achieve our final target, climate neutrality, then natural gas is also fossil fuel, and we have to fully decarbonize our gas sector. But why we haven't achieved as much as we are willing? Because other sectors have to well contribute too. So transport is the most difficult sector to decarbonize. We are witnessing growing mobility, well, except this year when there are significantly less flights and mobility inland too. And of course, we have to give competitive solutions for industry. And in this regard, green hydrogen might help us.
Okay, Mr. Sutt.
I would just add maybe a couple of points here. In my opinion, what has been standing on the way are 3+1 factors. The first is the cost of technology. The second is employment in these sectors. And the third is existing capital stock. And +1 is regulation. +1 is obviously moving very much to a direction, or has already been for a while, in the direction which supports the investment into green technologies. Not only, I think, in the power generation, but more broadly. And if we look at the cost of technology, then, for example, the cost of solar panels over the last 10 years has decreased by 80%. The cost of onshore wind turbines has decreased by about 40%, and the cost of offshore wind has decreased by about 30%. So you see that those factors which were prohibitive back in 10 years, that just economically investment alone was not viable, are changing very rapidly. And about 56% of capacity additions which have been made in the renewables have achieved lower energy cost than the most advanced new coal power plants. So I think the trend of technology is clearly there. It is going to push out very strongly any new investments into the fossil field. And as to the cost of capital, I mean, and that goes really broader, or cost of existing capital stock. If you look at the existing power generation plants, you look at the car industry, all of them have existing capital stock. There are financially two options. You either write them off immediately, which nobody is going to do, or you phase it off over time. And that's why I think the critical thing really is how we see the new investment evolving, how we can attract it more, and how fast it all can happen. I could give you just one example. If you look at the cost of computing power, then for $1, you could, over past quarter century, for every 4 years, get 10 times more computing power. Or if you put it in reverse, computing power has become 10 times cheaper in every 4 years over past 25 years. Will we see similar trend in the field of renewables, energy? We shall see. But clearly, as the technology is advancing, there will be much more opportunities. And I think for Europe, it's important to be on the side of innovation and not only being importers of a technology, which oftentimes is the case.
I very much subscribe to what Kadri and Andres said before. Just to add maybe a general point or more global picture, climate change is or carbon emissions are negative externalities in a sense that to curb the emissions, the cost has to be borne now and locally, but the benefits are global. And so it creates the incentive to cheat. In addition to that, many nations, fossil-rich nations, are interested in keeping the status quo. And when we look at the fossil fuel subsidies, even in the EU member states, these amount to huge amounts just recent report by European Commission demonstrates that we haven't been able to curb the subsidies. They amount to 50 billion euros annually. And maybe third aspect is that developing nations, their main focus is on development, and no one can blame them. 7 billion people strive to the living standards of energy-rich, food-rich, housing-rich, healthcare-rich, education-rich standards of that we in the Western societies enjoy. So in order to multiply the resources available, what we need is innovation and technology. And of course, as an energy developer, I'm really glad to see the developments in the renewables sector, but we also have to look at the more global picture. So innovation and technology are key in order to succeed.
Thank you. Fighting climate change is associated with such restricting aspects like higher taxes and more commanding rules for private persons and companies. For liberal politicians, this is always the hard case, you know. On the other hand, it is said that developing green tech can be a great opportunity for European economy. So what should we do to seize this opportunity? Maybe Mr. Sutt first.
Of course, if we talk about regulation, oftentimes the label attached is that this is negative and doesn't produce any good. Yes, a lot of regulation is negative, but there is also good regulation, and I think that is really a matter of design and how we how we produce it. As I said, the climate change is a real thing. It needs to be addressed, and it needs to be seen as an opportunity. If we use the regulation to design it in a way that we can foster innovation, then I think most people will be happy. Of course, what is our flip side of a coin, if we talk about the change and any innovation, it means also changes in employment, changes in demands for skills, and this is also what Commissioner Kadri mentioned in her opening remarks. Upskilling, reskilling of labor force will be extremely important in order to cope with the changing demands. And I think for Europe, what is really essential is that we can give a boost to our own innovation ecosystem so that we will be able to attract investment into Europe, which I think has a great potential. If we look back in the history, I mean, many great companies have been born in Europe, and oftentimes, in my opinion, we are too hesitant as Europeans to talk about our successes, and we are rather saying what is not in a good shape in Europe. So from that angle, I think we should be able to attract, and we also should be able to should be ambitious, because if we look at China, for example, they have set their carbon neutrality deadline by 2060, which is less ambitious than European. But for example, for conventional combustion engine cars, they want to phase out by 2035 all the cars which are not at least hybrid. So there is a clear push. Is it bad for business, bad for consumer? Not necessarily. And I think in general, the consumer preference is also something what is going to drive very much how the economy will evolve, what kind of products people will buy. Another example from Apple, they have announced as a company to be net zero on their carbon footprint by 2030. I mean, 2030 is around the corner. So I think there is the push for a change to become cleaner comes really from all corners, regulation, consumers, cheaper technology, And I think as liberals, we should facilitate that this development, innovation happens also big time here, so that we are rather innovation exporters than only innovation importers.
Well, energy transition doesn't mean necessarily higher taxes and even compulsory targets. Yes, to achieve 2020 targets, there were binding renewable targets for each and every member state here in European Union, but those targets for renewables were unique, so calculated based on the local possibilities, and most of our member states achieved those targets. If we are talking about taxation and excises, then this is the right of the member states to design their tax system, and we know that 1/3 of the subsidies are still going to fossil fuels. To achieve our higher climate targets, we need to invest into grids. We know that functioning regional markets will help us to accommodate more renewables, and without that it will be very difficult because of the bottleneck how to store renewable energy that tends to be very volatile. And of course we know that we need better cooperation between member states, because the most visible version from where we will get more renewables is offshore wind, and for that we need cooperation between different member states. Talking about taxation, then of course people are very worried that if we will aim higher climate goals, they must pay more. But it is not the case. Well, many technologies are becoming cheaper because of the volumes. And of course, if we will achieve the solution where consumers might be at the same time also be small producers, so-called prosumers, then this is a way how we can help people to earn back some of the money by producing their own energy. For example, installing solar PVs on their rooftops. Of course, we need public acceptance, but with the necessary steps, both at local level and EU level, this is achievable.
Well, already in 2006, the Stern Review on the economics of climate change concluded that early action on climate change has immense benefits compared to the costs. And indeed, this is true very much so at this stage. So what we need is not overly cautious targets in action nor comparisons with other nations not doing enough, but we need ambition, we need clear frameworks that encourage the investments in the right direction. That is what the investors appreciate. And we have success stories. So, for instance, a small country, Denmark. Denmark is home of Vestas, that is the biggest wind turbine manufacturer in the world, and home of Ørsted, which is the biggest offshore wind developer globally. We have success stories, and there's immense opportunity to tackle. So with the right regulatory framework, I think we are getting there. From the industry side, there are big changes in recent couple of years. We see many large companies setting targets to achieve carbon neutrality. We see that investors are pulling out from the fossil fuels and committing to cleaner technologies. So it is really happening and it's really ongoing, but we need a right regulatory framework in order to get there.
Thank you. Let's talk a bit about energy also. Mrs. Commissioner, which types of energy you see the most potential in Europe? Is it wind, hydro, nuclear?
Well, we need all renewables. So this is also solid biomass. And if we are talking about offshore, then not only wind, but also tidal and wave energy. Some of them are not, they are not, they are at the innovative phase so far, and they need a lot of research and innovation, and then they need testing period. But some of them might help us to achieve our climate neutrality target. EU is also heavily investing into the fusion energy. So almost half of the budget that I am responsible for goes to fusion project, ITER project, and this is not only EU's projects, but we are working together with India, Japan, China, Russia, UK, and also United States. And if this will work one day, if scientists will achieve what they are aiming for, then we will have a clean nuclear without waste. So the main thing is that we need to invest into research and innovation. And by doing so, we will achieve significant gains. For example, I had a chance to visit Vestas offshore wind farm in Denmark. And in Denmark, they built world's first offshore wind farm 30 years ago. So they were significantly smaller windmills, scale-wise and production-wise. And now the development has been a significant success story, only with 30 years. So actually we can't predict what are the exact sources by 2050, how we will achieve our goals. But if we are talking short term, then we have to prioritize energy efficiency principle. So basically, the cheapest energy and the cleanest energy for us is energy that we don't use. And that's why this renovation of buildings is also so important if we want to achieve higher targets for 2030, because we know that old building stock just consumes so much more energy to keep a comfortable indoor temperature than those buildings that we are building right now. And keeping in mind that 40% of our energy consumption goes to building, heating and cooling sector, then if you spend there so much, you can gain fast, and this is achievable. And Andres was also mentioning data, server parks. Well, this is also the place where lots of excess heat is produced, and we should also address this topic that if data server parks are built close to the housing districts, you can use waste heat, which is right now just wasted, but can be very useful for our heating system.
I think Vestas was a great example how we always need some early movers. And as Vestas started 30 years ago and is a global leader today, in order for us to be global leader in something 25, 30 years from now, obviously, we need to test, we need to innovate, and we need to invest heavily in research and development. I think that's really the key point. And again, I also agree on the mix. I mean, every country is different, and you can build offshore wind farm in a country where there is a sea. I mean, you can't build an offshore wind farm in the middle of Europe. But I think the broader question here also is how open are the societies to these kind of investments, because ultimately that determines a lot how much businesses can invest. Even if a regulation is friendly, and we know it from Estonia, we know it from other countries, that oftentimes local communities don't really want to see any industrial activity in their neighborhood. And this is a challenge what needs to be solved, and I think there is a need for more dialogue, and so that everybody could see what is in for them in this undertaking. Is it going to be easy? No. Is it impossible? No, it's possible. So it needs to more of a cooperation and discussion. And there was a question about nuclear. I mean, this is always highly heated topic, and I here very much agree what Kadri said. I mean, it's a question about waste. It's how you deal with the nuclear waste, and I think it's also a question about safety. And people need to find the comfort here. Do we need nuclear station in Estonia? I don't know at the moment, but we need studies. We need more scientific approach. And again, when we spoke about the energy system, the more we have wind and solar, you need some managed power production as well to balance the grid. And also you need a grid what is capable in absorbing all these things. So there are many interlinked challenges, and the more we allow investment and in innovation, I think the better solutions we will find out. And of course, every country doesn't have to do everything in her own. I mean, you can always learn from others, and I think connectivity is another point what is important, that we have cross-border connections so that we actually talk about a much bigger energy market. And last point on this, what hasn't been too much spoken of is also a resilience of a system, energy security, so that the system is not going to be down. We are not going to see the blackouts. I don't know, remember when in Estonia was last time a major blackout. There have been regional things because of a storm and these kind of events. But if the grid is just collapsing, or if there is a lack of a power supply in the grid, I mean, these are important questions to be discussed as well.
Well, in terms of the challenge, just to put it in front of us, in order to achieve carbon neutrality, we need quadrupling of the renewables capacity. So 4 times more capacity that we have today. Only during this decade, from 2020 to 2030, for instance, in the wind sector, we need to double the capacity compared each year compared to the previous one. And in addition to that, energy consumption has to come down by 1/3. So the challenge is really immense. And how to achieve that, the Commission has put forward a good perspective in order to achieve that. But of course, the challenge is really immense. Electrification, for instance. So we see that we need more and more electricity from renewables, from wind, from solar. And in order to use this electricity, we need more electrification of other sectors, industry, heating and cooling, transportation. And in order to achieve that, we need corresponding infrastructure, charging infrastructures, converting these fuels, electric fuels to so-called e-fuels, hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels. So the task is really immense. When in regard to nuclear, that you also asked, I would put the perspective of investor in front of the audience. Andres already mentioned really sharp cost reductions of renewables. So from the investor point of view, what we see is that the levelized cost of renewables, of utility scale solar or onshore wind parks, the cost is 4 times less compared to the conventional nuclear power plants. Or when we look at the UK Hinkley Point strike price, which is granted for 35 years at the level of £92 per megawatt hour. And we see what has happened in the offshore wind sector in the UK, where the granted strike price for 15 years is £40. So we see that the difference is very big. So first, the cost aspect. Second, nuclear power plants tend to have very long delays, and we see, and cost overruns as well. We see in Olkiluoto, just across the to the Finland, what's happening. The start of the nuclear power plant construction was in 2005, and it was supposed to be completed in 2010, and it's still not being completed. This year in August, it was the announcement of another deadline, which is 2022. We'll see whether this will actually materialize. Cost overruns have been several times compared to the initial budget. So we see that the nuclear sector is really something that investors are not looking at the moment, as the alternatives are so much cheaper, and also because the risks are much lower. So if Utilitas, the company where I'm working currently, is looking at, for instance, utility scale wind or solar parks, then we can develop this in different phases. So we don't have to make this huge investment initially. So it also actually reduces the risks for the investor point of view. And of course, the challenges in relation to the waste and the safety are all there. So at this stage, I think from the investor point of view, the focus is more on renewables.
Anders already mentioned this not in my backyard problem. In Estonia, we also know in many cases where local people are against big wind farms. So how to tackle this problem, how to explain people that we need carbon neutral solutions and wind parks and solar parks, how to explain it's necessary? What should we do?
Well, this is a very existing problem all across Europe, and not only in power generation, but also if we want to transport large amount of electricity, we need more grids. So there is also resistance against high voltage grids. Maybe one solution is that if we know that we need 20-fold renewable electricity, then we can prioritize the new projects in offshore. This is not easy too, because there are older sectors who have right to use the sea territory, shipping, fisheries, military, and we try to address this with our offshore energy strategy, so that that in some regions where you have shallow coastal waters, you can also propose a multi-use of those territories, so that offshore wind farms are not pushed to the territories where it is significantly more expensive to build wind farms. But on land, well, this is a matter of negotiations, and we do see that all across the Northern Europe there are lots of wind farms. You can also you can also replace old technology with new one that is more advanced, and I think this is one of the easiest options.
From a developer's point of view, of course, we try to do utmost in order to reach the agreements with the local communities and municipalities by, for instance, engaging people from the very early on, identifying local leaders, informing them about the intentions, compensating negative externalities, providing new revenues for the municipalities. Also trying to plan in a way that corresponds to the expectations and needs of the local communities. So all this is something that the developers try to do with more or less success. But of course, as Kadri already mentioned, there are existing industries that are benefiting, for instance, from the offshore environment already today, and trying to work out the agreements there need sometimes more than the wishes or the means that one single developer can offer. And what we need here is also political leadership and encouragement so that local communities and also traditional sectors see that encouraging investments into renewables is something that is politically prioritized, which is important. So we need encouragement and leadership from the political leadership as well in order to achieve these goals. Of course, what we need also is having a planning in place, having reasonable time leads for the different application and bureaucratic procedures. This we need as well, but first and foremost, I think there's a need for the leadership here.
That I very much agree. Leadership is always important, and maybe one reflection on what could be done. All sorts of revenue sharing agreements, I think, should help to convince also the local people who have something in their, not in the backyard. Nobody is going to build a wind turbine in anybody's backyard. I mean, let's also be honest on that point. But if there are concerns for a local community, then you need to discuss, and some revenue sharing, I think, is what is fair. How to arrange it? Should it be regulation? My first preference always is that let people talk, and they are probably able to find a better agreement rather than something what is enforced by somebody else. And there are examples, for example, in the PV investments in Estonia, where owners of a land is not necessarily a developer of a PV park, but there is a financial investor who is putting the money. There is a third company who is doing construction and operational management, and there is a revenue sharing. And that kind of model, I think, is something what could be looked at as an example. So there should be some degree of incentives, but I also think as time passes, also, and this is the leadership point, the more people understand that this is the right thing to do, maybe there is also more flexibility in terms of saying, okay, let's do it here, let's agree on how it is done, so that's not really disturbing our everyday life, but we are doing the right thing, and doing the right thing is important. I think it's psychologically important for most people, and let's see how life evolves. Hopefully we will get better outcomes.
Thank you. Regarding energy infrastructure, is Europe connected enough at the moment? Maybe.
Well, not sufficiently, I guess. Kadri can tell in more detail, because as we see, for a long time we have had targets of interconnectivity in the range of 10–15%, and we are still not there in order to have the interconnections in place to achieve even these targets. So what is needed, especially in times of high shares of renewables, is massive scale up of the energy interconnectors, energy infrastructure, in order to export excess electricity when there's excess, for instance, of wind in the north or solar in the south, and then possibilities to import electricity when there's a shortage. So this is beneficial for everybody. The framework of PCI is there. In general, the framework is there, and things are moving in the right direction, but it's just painstakingly slow.
I have been in office 11 months, and during this time we have decided to finance 3 big interconnector projects. Biscay Bay project that connects Spain and France, Celtic connection that connects France and Ireland, and now the latest is desynchronization of 3 Baltic states, a desynchronization from PREL network, that means from Russia and Belarusian network. But we still have one member state who is isolated, this is Cyprus. And we do need more electricity interconnectors between different member states so that we can accommodate more renewables. Well, actually 10 years ago, when Europe witnessed gas crisis, natural gas crisis, then lots of investments went to the natural gas connections and also LNG terminals, because we wanted to give the security to each and every member state that they are not dependent only from one importer. And now, according to our estimations, the gas network is in place. We don't need to invest anymore to natural gas pipelines. Of course, we need some investments to upgrade them so that, for example, they are fit for hydrogen, or they can accommodate more renewable gases. But according to the revised 10E, this is Trans-European Network Energy Regulation, we will accommodate more electricity projects, and also we will open it up for offshore grid.
No, I agree. And on top of having good interconnections which are reliable, I think for energy security point of view, it is also important that there is sufficient production capacity in Europe what could meet the demand, including the peak demand, because you can be connected, but if there is no power in connection, then this connection alone doesn't do the trick. And that is an important topic as well to be addressed.
Thank you. I see on the screen Mr. Federley. Is he listening us? Can he talk?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Mr. Federley, I just started to close up the energy topic. So have you been listening to us? Do you have any comments on the energy topic you want to say? What is the future of energy sector in Europe? What do you see?
Well, that is a massive question, of course. First of all, glad to see that we have in the family with Kadri the right commissioner, and she has a major task ahead, and she is taking a great responsibility. I can see her being really, really active on the issue. We had a dinner in Brussels before Brussels just shut down again, where we could have a more in-depth discussion also on the energy topics. I think that what we did the last mandate was that we revised and we put the whole energy union in place, all the legislation. Now with the Green Deal, we are going to see through all the legislation again, and in combination with this also create a hydrogen strategy. Because we also have a few issues which we haven't been, as a union, addressing before. We've been talking about renewables. We have been talking about energy efficiency in buildings, and so on and so forth. But What we have been lacking and what we've been talking a bit about but not really tackling is energy storage, which is a huge issue. Looking at Denmark last summer, for example, they sold the kilowatts on the market for 0 cents per kilowatt. That is, of course, nothing that works for any kind of market in the long run. Because if I'm an investor, I want to make sure that I get my investments back. That's basic market economy. And if one country in the world understands market economy, that's Estonia. So in those times, we have to make sure that we use the energy in another way. Creating hydrogen then, green hydrogen, is super important. That needs, to do that, you need massive amounts of cheap electricity. So those days in the summer where it's windy and it's sunny and it's warm, that's when you should produce that. That could go also for helping our aviation sector to become greener. What you get as a residue from burning the hydrogen is clear water, basically totally clean water. But doing that in the wintertime, it's totally waste of money and waste of energy resources. At the moment in Sweden, we're having a rather great time. It's rather warm. It's rather wet, which means that we are filling up our energy depots in form of water in Sweden at the moment. But this has to work all across the European market, and smart grids is of course an important solution, making sure that we do not waste energy while transporting it. And at the end of the day, creating new jobs, creating new opportunities, because we also know that there's a lot of people working in the energy sector who are looking at the future with a rather dark mind. Coal is going to get away. Fracking is going to get away. And we have a responsibility in the transition to make sure that new jobs are created. Now, looking at the battery factories coming in Sweden, now where we recycle batteries for our vehicles, in that transition, and we produce them a bit further up north. The same company has now gotten the first plant for putting the batteries together in Poland. There you can start to see the transition actually, and I think there's 200 people or so working for doing this in Poland at the moment, and there will be thousands. But before you see that, you won't be able to deliver hope to people who are in a vulnerable position. So when we talk about the big lofty words and the big schemes on the transition, we have to make sure that people on the ground needs to get hope in this transition and needs to see the benefits of it. Because if we do not do this with the people, people will turn against us. And that means that we are hurting ourselves, our market and our industry. So these huge topics, and I'm glad to see my old friend Kadri being on top of the issue, and she's doing a great job there.
Thank you. I think it's good time to move on to the transport sector now. Because you already told some things about the hydrogen. So in the next 10 years, will you see hydrogen solutions as a serious alternative to fossil fuels and electricity-based solutions? And what are the biggest barriers? So who wants to be the first one?
Well, indeed we do. And that's why we presented also a hydrogen strategy. Because this is, well, there are sectors where you can't use electricity. It is either technologically impossible or just too expensive. And there are sectors in transport where this is a case, well, heavy-duty transport, for example. But we have to, well, create a market, and we have to create a demand. Well, different countries have tried to, well, create this kind of environment. For example, Switzerland. Well, two major companies for retail have announced that all their heavy-duty vehicles or trucks will use hydrogen, and that created a demand so that there is now a network for hydrogen, so that the rest of the transport sector can follow. But of course, our problem right now is that 90% of our hydrogen that we do use comes from natural gas. So only 2% is renewable. And to change it, we need more renewable energy. And exactly, the hydrogen might be a solution where you store the excess electricity in the moment when grid doesn't need it, but well, this is a very favorable windy day out there, so that you will not stop your windmills because electricity grid doesn't accept it, but you will store this in the bay that renewable hydrogen offers us.
Indeed, Utilitas is also looking at the hydrogen option really carefully, and we very much welcome the initiatives of Kadri, European Commission, in regard to hydrogen strategy, and not only, but also industrial initiatives that very much go in the right direction. Hydrogen itself is not energy source but energy carrier, and as such it has to be produced from either natural gas or electricity, and what we support is of course green hydrogen, so production of hydrogen from solar or wind or any other source of renewable electricity. And in order to achieve the scale of hydrogen development in Europe, what we need is really immense investments into renewables, and we are nowhere near of achieving these goals. So this cannot be forgotten. And of course, what we need is consumption of hydrogen. Otherwise, even if we are able to produce the hydrogen, there's nowhere the consumption in place. So definitely hydrogen has a place in sectors which is difficult to decarbonize, in the industry, in chemical industry, in shipping, transportation, long distance transportation. So I think hydrogen has a good future.
I would just add that of course, hydrogen is going to be used. There are estimates it's going to be 700 billion business annually by 2050. So it will be a sizable market. I would see it not necessarily as an alternative to electric vehicles in transportation, but as one complement. We could use both, and that is eventually will depend which technology will be cheaper and more fit for a purpose. So, but in general, yes, hydrogen clearly needs to be supported. It's the right thing to do, and there is also a sizable financial package from the Commission. Lots of countries in Asia are investing heavily in hydrogen infrastructure. So I think Hyundai has a plan to export over 60,000 hydrogen-powered trucks by 2030. So, I mean, the business is there. The question is what we can do to facilitate. And as I said, I see it not as a substitute, but as a complement to our clean sources of energy.
Mr. Federer? Anything to add?
Please say Frederick. I get so nervous when you say Mr. Fedley. The only time I get addressed Fedley, that's when my mother was angry with me when I was a teenager. So please say Frederick. No, it's all interconnected with also the energy union in a massive way. Because we have had, and you know a bit about this, a plan economical view of now, how do I get my face in here? So a plan economical view on energy production. Basically, in Sweden, the debate has been if we use 50 terawatt hours, we should produce 50 terawatt hours. Now, that's totally wrong way of looking at it. We should see how much are we able to produce, and how could we export electricity, or how could we use the energy carrier, which is in hydrogen. I don't see hydrogen as a substitute to other fuels, but it's a complement in different sectors where we won't be able to electrify. If you look at the transport sector, which is the biggest problem we have in Sweden on reaching the climate goals, our electricity production is rather good, our industry is doing good, our farmers are doing good. We have isolated houses since a long time because it's freezing cold in the winter, so we already did a lot of that work. There's some more to gain there, and also in efficiency on how we use the kilowatts, because the best kilowatt is of course the one we do not have to use at all, and we can then use that kilowatt hour for something else. But the transport sector, we have still a long way to go, and it has to be dealt with in several ways. I just got my first electric car. I live remotely in the countryside, and what the debate has been in Sweden is that, oh, it's a big blow towards the countryside if you start electrifying. And I would say the total opposite. When I lived in downtown Stockholm, if I needed to charge my electrical car, I would have to plug in by the fan, by the stove, and put the cable all through the kitchen, out over the pedestrian lane, over the street to the other side. Now, that's not workable. But what we do have here, I now have a charger on my farm here where I live. And my car takes me about 400 kilometers if I drive the way the signs say. The way I do drive is about 330 kilometers. So I go to the airport on a full charged car in the morning. When I get back to the airport, it's fully charged and I go back to my farm. But the thing is, you are having a way, we have learned the way of private transport in a way that you stop by a gas station the whole time. Now, I tell my friends here, say, oh, it's so inconvenient to stop and charge. Yeah, but you basically never do that. You almost always charge when you are at home. So oil and water will never meet, but as soon as you get your electrical car, you realize I'm basically never stopping. I still stop once in a while, but that's because I need coffee. I need a hot dog to survive to the dinner or so. But I don't do the stopping and charging. So a lot of things is happening, but then also a lot more is being transported on trucks, and we are trading more online. Especially COVID has, immensely moved ahead on the transports. And I don't really see that we will be able to deliver the fine network of transports and deliveries on electricity on faraway remote places with heavy transport. So there hydrogen might be an option, renewables might be an option. So there will be a number of ways that we will facilitate a green transport in industry, in transport, in business, and in private sector. And I think that we're thinking of it in the wrong way if we say that we will go from 100% fossil fuel to 100% electricity or 100% hydrogen. There will be several sources of energy feeding into our transports.
If we want to reduce emissions, then we need to direct more people to public transport also. So how to do that, and what, if any, role has micro-mobility in it?
Well, actually, Frederick came back to the basic that, everything that we do will impact us. And not only how we move around, but also, during my endless video conferences, one of my interlocutors told me useless fact that if we all would stop making photos of our food and send it to their friends, we would need, here in Europe, one nuclear power plant less. Because, this is somewhere in the cloud and it is stored, and, it takes also energy. And most probably it's a very popular thing to do now during COVID days. But about public transport, people are, it depends where you live. And it also depends what are your behavior, how do you behave, what you want to do during your day. And I was told that young people tend to use public transport more because when you drive yourself, you can't use your mobile phone and you can't be connected. But if someone else drives you, then you can be online all the time. And that's a very good argument to use public transport.
I think mobility is, of course, a fascinating topic. This was a great example about sending the photos. I think we should still allow people to communicate and to be connected. That is also important energy what people will get from being connected, at least mentally. But I also like very much the example what Frederick gave about electric vehicles, and I think it links to public transportation as well. In a way, I think many of these things are sort of the biggest limitation is our constrained thinking, that we are somehow afraid of thinking a bit outside of the box. But okay, if I have an electric car and if battery gets empty in the middle of the road, what can I do? I mean, these things could really happen, but this is a rare event. You charge your car when you sleep or when you work in the office, and that is the way how you need to develop the grid. And the same goes for public transportation. If we talk about electric buses, I mean, they need to be also charged somewhere. You need to have a grid. And I think there are many other things in terms of mobility what are important. In ideal world, you shouldn't really move from one suburb to the opposite through downtown in order to go to school or to go to your office. So the more you can actually do your things or business and your hobbies in the proximity of your place of living, I think the better it is. So the whole topic of urban planning, and we see also here in Estonia much more electric scooters, electric bicycles, and these things. People like it. Of course, once proper winters return, there is a limitation how much you can scooter in the winter or electric bike in the winter in Estonia. But then there should be other means of solutions or other solutions. And I think probably the biggest or by far the most important factor what determines people using public transportation is, I mean, it has to be convenient. If a bus route is really, it takes an hour for me to get from point A to point B, and by car I get in 20 minutes or 15 minutes. I mean, there is no incentive to go for a bus.
And best example here in Tallinn, you always take a tram to go to airport because you know that it takes only 8 minutes. But by car you can be stopped at traffic jam.
Yeah, so I think urban planning is really critically important here, and also related to the climate. I mean, the less traffic, I mean, the better for us.
Could I?
Yeah.
Yes. Just shortly, in adding to this, I think that we are still locked in a way that we think that I have to own everything myself. You know, the biggest waste of money I do, that's my car outside here. Because even though I drive like crazy, some people say, I live in the countryside, I need the car so much, and I'm driving so much that it will become a problem. Now, that is for the most part not true, because you still don't use your whole battery for a full day in many times, and the batteries are getting better. But the thing is, even though I've been driving 8,000 kilometers now during these 2.5 months that I had the car, or if it's 3 months that I had a car, that's a rather big sum, especially since I couldn't drive for a while because I hurt my back. But then again, most of the time it's just still here at the farm. Now, can we find incentives so where my neighbor and I could basically find an economy where we share the car? Maybe there are already an app saying that I put my car there, so these days I won't use it at all because we have plenary sessions. I will be locked in my house 24/7 because we're voting. These days you can come and rent the car, pay 20 euros or whatever, and you can use it for a full day. Now, that would give incentivize the use of a product that we have standing still. And maybe when we get self-driving cars even, you just order the car, the size of the car that you need for this thing you're going to do. If you're going to go to IKEA, or if you're going to go grocery shopping, or you're going to go on vacation, you order the perfect car for that moment and for these days. And you only pay that sum of money, because actually a car is a bad investment for everyone, because nobody uses it at much if you're not a taxi driver or so. So you actually use the full potential of the car. And this is about market economy, it's about efficiency and optimizing the value of your car. And there we can gain so much. Probably we don't need as many cars as we have today, and we can still get more transport out of the same car fleet that we have today. Volvo is now creating a new brand which is only built on sharing of the cars. So that's the whole idea of the cars. They're developing as we speak. From 2024, I had the CEO of Volvo Cars, I think it was in the beginning of February, just before the first lockdown in Brussels, in my office. And he said, and I asked him, the new Euro rules on emissions, what do you think about them? And he said, basically, this is not a perfect quote, but basically he said, I don't really care about that. Put forward whatever rules you want. We will now have 3 car brands out on the market, 2 of them totally new from Sweden, and we will be from 2024 100% electrical. So do whatever you want, because we don't care. That's too much work, that's too complicated, there's too much rules. If we go 100% electric with all 3 our brands, now this is going to happen. The market has decided and we're going that direction, well, whatever we politicians think.
I would gladly follow up from what Frederick has said. Indeed, what I think as well is that in the future, owning a car, owning a private car, especially in the city environment, would be a luxury. Just imagine that annually, a privately owned car on average drives 20,000 kilometers, and a taxi 200,000 kilometers, 10 times more. Indeed, I think in the future we should also discourage the use of private cars, but certainly the business models are also moving there in order to use this discrepancy. For instance, driverless cars, if there's no humans behind the wheels, then there's no reason of having such heavy cars as we have today, 1.5 tons or 2 tons or even 3 tons of private vehicles. So the cars can be, instead of driverless lightweight pods of 300-400 kilograms. And as such, we reduce the consumption of different materials and also need less energy to drive these cars around. And I think this is definitely a perspective where we are heading. I personally don't own a private car. I use on a daily basis a combination of different means: public transportation, electric scooters, car sharing option, and I combine these every day to commute. And I think I'm doing pretty well. I think interconnectivity, innovation in the area of mobility is really a key. On-demand solution, for instance, something that Estonia is piloting now is a very interesting prospect outside of city environments as well, so that we have more frequent and convenient public transportation service available.
Thank you. I think we have 15 minutes to go, so we can't unfortunately cover agriculture and industry and waste topics, but we can go and see if we have any questions. Before I will see what questions I have on my phone, then anybody from the hall who wants to ask something? Raise your hand, please. Okay, we have one.
Hello, my name is Pavel. So question is more about the so-called blue hydrogen. So recently, UK government, along with the European Commission, they gave a green light to so-called CCS, carbon capture and storage project in northeast of Scotland. So where the existing fossil fuel system, natural gas pipelines, redundant ones, they're not just abandoned, but used for, re-injecting the CO2 back into reservoir. So what's the view of the European Commission by using the North Sea infrastructure? Because the decommissioning is going to be the future for the next 20 years, because small fields are going to be depleted. And the second thing, because Equinor recently, this week actually, the sustained-owned oil company Norwegian declared their strategy to be net zero as well by 2050. But at the same time, they said they're going to increase oil and gas production by 2-3% by 2026, which is kind of an interesting statement, but anyway. And they also betting on the carbon capture storage as well. So what's the European Commission view on this problem, of this solution as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're discussing carbon capture and storage, and mainly carbon capture and usage at different levels. For example, this was one of the discussions that we had during G20 energy ministers meeting, because some of the countries who are producing fossil fuels do see that it helps them to achieve climate targets, but still continue with production. In our close neighborhood, for example, in Norway, they are also using depleted gas fields to store carbon. And this might be a solution how we will achieve climate neutrality by 2050, because there are sectors that still continue to use fossil fuels. We will open financing for pilot projects for carbon capture and storage. There are different member states who are interested. The most advanced in EU is most probably Netherlands, who is exactly looking towards North Seas. And if we are talking about blue hydrogen, then we see it as a way how we can replace faster gray hydrogen that is made out of natural gas without capturing carbon. We can't replace it only with green hydrogen in this decade, because to do so, we would use all our green hydrogen just to replace gray hydrogen. But we need more sectors to start using hydrogen. And that's why we need bigger volumes than we can deliver only by using green hydrogen this decade. And that's why, from our point of view, we are open for this kind of solution that carbon capture and storage gives us.
Okay, I have one question from Facebook. I will rephrase it a bit. What can every person do in individual level to fight with the climate change? So everybody on individual level, what you can do to help to fight the climate change?
Well, yes, I think everybody can do something in order to reduce their environmental footprint, consume less, be more conscious about waste you are creating, recycle, and then make more conscious decisions about your transportation choices, for instance. If you need, for instance, a private car, or you can opt for alternatives, and yeah, in general, make more conscious decisions and be more conscious as a consumer as well. So this would have an impact on the big industries through the change of behavior of the consumers.
Yeah, just add to this list the consumer perspective, because if you make your choice also based on what is the carbon footprint of a specific company or a specific product, I think you can also direct the way how the society as such moves. I know it's at the margin, but I think it will become increasingly important driver to actually make the change to happen in the industries, on top of everything what René also mentioned at the individual level, what you can do in your household.
Well, yes, indeed, we should waste less. And well, this is in not only in energy field, but also how we use everyday necessary things. And well, there is a saying in Estonian that someone's old is other person's new. So circular economy definitely helps us so that we will not force industry to produce so much, because things will last longer if we keep this in mind.
I think that we can turn that question over a bit also. We in politics and in policy making, what are we doing to enable an easy way of being environmentally friendly? I agree with everything that was said before, but I think that we are moving into smarter homes. I have an app where I can control when the lights are on and off and so on. We will probably have some kind of energy storage in the house, so you use it better over the 24 hours of the day. So when it's cheapest, you charge your battery at home, and when it's most profitable and where there's much energy on the market, that's when you actually start your washing machine or what have you at home. I think there will be several ways of making it easier to be environmentally friendly. This will also, just as Kadri said on the picture of the food, this will also require a lot of extra energy because we are going to have smarter homes that also consume electricity. But just compare the way that probably my first refrigerator in my student apartment some 20 years ago probably consumed more energy keeping my milk cold than actually my refrigerator, my freezer, and my ice machine do together today. So a lot of things are happening. And just the other day, it was a colleague from Belgium who was the main rapporteur, Philippe de Backer, who now just stepped down as minister in the Belgian government. We needed to rescale the scale of what was energy efficient on our household machines because you started having so many pluses after the A or A plus. So it didn't make sense to anyone again. So that was done the last mandate, changing that. Because there's still so much more efficiency to get out of our machines, which basically means that you can do more for the same amount of kilowatts. And that together with smart homes and some storage in the homes, there will be a massive turnover. So it will be super, when in place, when implemented, it will be super easy to be environmentally friendly. Up till then, you still have to take your own responsibility in doing as much as you can. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions from the hall? No, if not, then okay, another one. And then I have few ones left from Facebook also.
Yeah, sorry for questions. I'm just representing from energy sector. That's why it's energy transition, a hot topic in our sector. So a question about geothermal. What's the European Commission's view of the geothermal? I mean, people view it as something that's kind of countries that do have favorable geological conditions to do, but we've got, and I've got colleagues who moved to geothermal energy, and for example in Germany, when they're drilling wells many kilometers into the earth and to circulate water and produce basically steam. So what's the European Commission's view on this type of energy over the next 20, 30 years? Thank you.
Well, as I was telling you earlier, the exact decision what is the energy mix of each and every member state is their sovereign right. But geothermal is hot topic in several member states. This has to be based on research, so that that you know what is the impact for neighboring regions, and there are several regions who are researching it right now. So from European Commission point of view, we have financed some of the projects from the research side. Well, this is mainly used for central heating, and if it replaces fossil fuels, then definitely helps us also to achieve our climate targets.
I have another question for Kadri here. Will there be initiatives by Commission on increasing low level of minimal common fossil excess duty rates? That means natural gas, solids, liquids. Yes.
Well, changing tax size is one of the tasks of Commissioner Gentiloni's mission letter, but it requires consensus among member states. So definitely he is a very experienced commissioner, being himself former Italian Prime Minister. He's up to the task, but the negotiations to change something will be a difficult exercise.
Has one more question. Why did the Estonian government start a nuclear energy support commission? If we think that we should use different renewable energies, then we need an energy commission. Then why we need energy commission, especially when Europe does not support nuclear?
The European Commission has never supported any nuclear power plant investments. But despite of that fact, several member states have announced that they will plan to build new reactors. The latest announcement came from Poland that doesn't have any nuclear power plants so far. From our point of view, we are responsible for nuclear safety, and not only in EU, but also in our close neighborhood. And actually, during last week, I have dedicated a lot of energy towards Ostrovets nuclear power plant that was built 40 kilometers from Vilnius and has entered to the next stage only this week. So this is what is my responsibility. Can't explain the decisions made by Estonian government. I'm not there anymore, but one day we were there together with Rene.
Yes, I don't know either why the decision was made. Probably because there's interested entrepreneurs who are promoting a nuclear option. What would be required in order to, maybe the second half of the question was that maybe there's a similar committee necessary for the promotion of renewables or hydrogen. Indeed, the current government has Energy and Climate Committee in place where such matters are discussed, but of course, we as industry, we would welcome even more and stronger push towards the take-up of renewables and hydrogen solutions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from the hall? If not, then I think we'll...
One sharp.
Yeah.
Frederick maybe wants to promote.
Maybe Frederick, some last remarks from you?
No, sorry if you heard my dog yelling. I have a Great Dane and somebody entered the house. I have no clue who's in the house now, but it will be interesting to see. And she started barking. I think that the topic for this seminar is super interesting. I think that this is one of the basic and most important issues on how we solve the climate issue and how we also deliver the market economy of tomorrow. We are in a transition, I think, beyond comparison. This is one of the biggest transitions the modern society has seen. It will effectively change our life in so many ways. So, and staying ahead in this race towards tomorrow, which will give us advantages on a global market also. It will create new jobs, which we still not can understand what kind of jobs they are. So I think that it's a very timely topic, and I'm glad to see such a great panel, and thank you for having me also this morning.
Anders?
Yeah, if I just may to leave one last thought, we didn't discuss that topic that much, but if you look financing from commercial sources, then it is increasingly becoming important that any company knows what is its carbon footprint, because that is determining the financing terms. There will be increasingly more regulations, so that the investment funds, banks, they need to assess what is the impact on the climate of their clients. And I think it's a great opportunity for any business to really revisit and to do a deep dive in how they do the business, what they can change, how become more efficient. And money, I think, is a lot of money available for transitioning to become more green.
Any other?
Thank you for a great panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Frederick, for joining.
Thank you, Frederick.
Okay, and now we have
Bye.
some networking. Bye. We have coffee and everything, so thank you.